Hi everyone, bonjour tout le monde, bienvenue à cette session des membres. Welcome to this member session. Cette session sera en anglais seulement. On a des invités spéciaux de CADS. This session will be in English only, but don't hesitate if you have any question in French. N'hésitez pas si vous avez des questions en français, vous pouvez les poser. On sera là pour y répondre. On a aujourd'hui des invités spéciaux de CADS, donc on est super content d'avoir avec nous Michelle Schaefer et Thomas Griffiths, right? Did I say it well? Good.
Perfect.
Correct me if it's my accent. So welcome. Thanks for being here and thanks for putting up together this presentation. We're super excited to have you presented this to our instructor membership. Just for a little bit of a context, folks that are in the session. Last season at our evaluator training, we had the CADS coming and running a few training sessions for our evaluator crew, and then we thought that we would extend the collaboration to all of our members. So this is the reason of this session. If for any reason you can't attend the full session and don't want to miss any of the content, this is recorded and it will be accessible tomorrow on our YouTube channel. So we'll get started. I'll hand the microphone to, we also have, I'm sorry, I'm Genevieve Piloto. I'm the Director of Education and Program for CASI. And we also have Michelle Clifford, one of our national technical team member that's here today. She's going to be co-hosting the session with me and asking some questions. So thanks, Michelle. I'll hand the microphone to Michelle Schaefer first, and you can introduce yourself and your role to CADS.
Hi, my name is Michelle, and I've been with CADS since 2010, and I have various roles, mostly related to snowboarding. I am on the technical committee, and we have a snowboarding subcommittee, and Tom and I have been heavily involved in creating and building the certification process for snowboarders. When we both started, it was only skiing.
Yeah. And good evening, everybody. I'm Thomas Griffith. Home hill is Windsport in Calgary. I've been with CADS since approximately 2004, so going on 21 seasons this year. Like Michelle, I've previously served on the CADS technical committee, and we were fundamental in getting a snowboard specific certification pathway started within the CADS environment. So look forward to growing that and to further collaboration with the CASI members.
Thanks.
Okay, so basically today we're going to define a little bit what we mean by neurodiversity and some of the language around that to make sure we're all on the same page. And we're going to look at some of the potential benefits of snowboarding for neurodivergent learners. And then we're going to go into some tips and tools that may be useful for instructors working with that population. So you can flip ahead there, Jen, and keep going. So we're going to talk about these terms, which may be familiar to some, but not everyone. And they're terms that are becoming more popular and more well-known. But essentially, neurodiversity is just the recognition that we all have unique brains and our minds are diverse, just the way there's diversity in our ethnicity or our gender or our sexuality. And that is a biological fact. It's indisputable that the way that we think and learn and process information is unique to each of us. So that is what that term means, neurodiversity. It's recognizing that fact. And when we talk about neurotypical is a term that is used for individuals whose brains and thinking and processing is related and linked with what is generally deemed as typical or common or normal in society. And neurodivergent is the opposite of that. So neurodivergent is someone whose brain is diverging from what is considered the norm. And so someone who is neurodivergent, their mind, the way they think and process and learn, may be a little different
Sure.
to what is common. And when we're talking about this term, and you can flick to the next slide, it's a very broad umbrella. And so there are many labels or diagnoses, and you can just keep flicking it, Jen, that come under this heading. And when this list pops up, we'll recognize as well that this is it's not an exhaustive list. And so people that may have one of these labels or diagnoses may resonate with the term neurodivergent, or they may not. Neurodivergent is not a medical term, it's a social term. And it's a term that was actually created by advocates, mostly autistic individuals, that wanted to recognize that there's actually benefit to having brains that work differently. In the medical model, the focus is on deficit and what is wrong with it. And this time is celebrating that there actually can be really wonderful things about having minds and brains that work differently. And so just recognizing that this is not all of the labels that may come under the umbrella of neurodivergent. And then there are people that really resonate with that term, but don't have a diagnosis or a particular medical label. And so it's a choice whether someone resonates with this term or not. And if we go to the next slide, this is just a recognition that sometimes when we're talking about the spectrum of neurodivergent or functioning, there's a tendency to make it quite linear. So where someone may think of low functioning on one end and high functioning on the other end, but that's very simplistic and it's very limited. So this diagram helps us to think of it more like spokes of a bicycle wheel, or in this diagram in particular, it's kind of little wedges. And recognizing that each of us, whether we're neurodivergent or neurotypical, have different aspects in our thinking and processing. And so some of the examples up there are motor skills, proprioception, emotional regulation, self-care. And there's areas where we excel, and there's areas where we need support. And that is true of everybody. And so when we only kind of limit things to low functioning and high functioning, we're missing a lot of the nuances. And what happens when people get put into the low functioning camp, sometimes there's not a recognition of what they actually are able to do and where they excel. And when people are put into the high functioning camp, sometimes what happens is that the areas that they need support in get lost because they do well in other areas. So instead, the invitation is to try to recognize that it's more complex than that. Just going to break down a couple of terms here really quickly. So proprioception is understanding where we are in space. Interoception is being able to tune in to the signals that our body is providing to us. So examples are like hunger, thirst, pain, those kinds of things. And so for some folks, that might be really easy to tune into those signals. And for others, it's not as easy and the signals are much dimmer. And the other term that may be unknown is executive functioning. And so executive functioning, that is related to basically organizing and planning and how easy that is for someone or not. And then I'm going to hand it over to Tom to do some more definitions.
So for tonight, we're going to particularly focus in on 3 medical diagnoses that people may feel more comfortable sharing in a learning environment. So the first one we're going to look at is autism spectrum disorder. Previously, medically, this was divided up into a bunch of different diagnoses, but in the last revision of the diagnostic manual, they've classified a lot of the spectrum disorders together, and it may come with a level depending on the person's ability to receive that information from their caregivers or medical professionals. Anywhere from level 1, which is what on the previous slide people would consider high functioning in most areas, all the way to level 3, which needs persistent supports in their daily lives. But for tonight, it's important that autism is recognized as a spectrum in many areas, like the previous graphic showed, but it is not defined by the level of the person's intelligence. It is defined by the differences in social communication and behaviors and their ability to interact with what we would consider typical social environments. Like Michelle said, it's a spectrum and it's going to affect every individual in unique and different ways. So as instructors, it's important for us to be able to recognize those differences and not see them as a deficit in the learning environment, and try and find a different way of approaching that individual, either through their special interests or through some of their stronger skills to build a better learning environment for that individual. If we could have the next slide, please, Jen. The second one that we're going to touch on tonight is related to anxiety, and this, in a medical sense, is different than the anxiety that we would feel when ourselves as individuals are approaching a unique or novel situation or a new challenge where, you know, your body is getting ready to do something that it might be challenging because it's not been done before, or we know it's challenging because we have tried and failed in the past. And that is a biological reaction to danger that has evolved in humans. And it's not generally a bad thing, but for people with an anxiety diagnosis, that temporary and occasional anxiety becomes much more manifest, and it can manifest itself in situations that other neurotypical individuals wouldn't feel anxiety in. So if one of our learners, lets us know that they have an anxiety disorder, or we notice that they're starting to break away from the group or turn inwards on themselves and stop participating as much, we're going to go through some tips that can help an instructor who encounters that situation in a lesson situation. Further, anxiety disorders may not just affect the individual in the moment. It could continue on through the day with sleep dysregulation, poor nutrition or ability to take in sustenance, lack of concentration, and lowered energy levels throughout the day. Next slide, please. And the third one we're going to look at is the attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. People generally with ADHD will have differences in their ability to pay attention to certain things. But what many people may not recognize is there's actually 3 different types of ADHD that can be diagnosed. One is the hyperactive variety, the second is an inattentive variety, and then there's a hybrid where the person's activity or energy levels and their attentiveness will vary throughout the day or throughout the tasks that are being presented to them. For the majority of people in these diagnoses, it is related to their ability to pay attention and focus on things that they may not have an interest in, so like school or math, but it also affects their ability to make good decisions and to retain information that they've previously learned. So for us in a lesson situation, being able to introduce novel tasks that are all working towards the same goal might help us lock in one of these individuals and get them towards that hyper focus mode, because the novelty is increasing their attention span. So yeah, like I said, we're gonna look at these 3 potential diagnoses, and later on in the presentation, we'll have tips and tricks to help us manage behaviors and build the best learning environment we can. And over to you, Michelle.
Okay, so Jen's gonna put on a video for us, and this is from a woman named Jessica McCabe, and she has a YouTube channel called How to ADHD, and she makes lots of great videos about ADHD and how it impacts her and other people. And this specific video is about exercise. And so it is, we're just going to watch a small portion of it, but she's talking about some of the barriers that show up for her as someone with ADHD in trying to do exercise.
Bon, je n'ai pas assez d'énergie à la fin de la journée. La motivation peut être un obstacle. Les valeurs concurrentes.
Keep switching back in French. Sorry.
So 242 is a good place to start when it's in English again, please.
Yeah. We have some technical problems.
Bon, je n'ai pas assez d'énergie à la fin de la journée.
So yeah, if you do see this video and find it interesting, it's worth checking out her channel. She has many, many, many videos.
Let me know what you think. Okay, back to the blog. So some of the barriers that are common.
Bon, je n'ai pas assez d'énergie à la fin de la journée.
Sorry. Okay, I'll just
Okay.
do something else.
Bon, je n'ai pas assez d'énergie à la fin de la journée. Tu roules. Je roule. D'accord.
Okay, I'll just open another window.
So yeah, this is funny because we
Back to the
already
blog.
fixed this.
Some of the barriers that are common to working out are time. I don't have enough time, or I don't have enough energy at the end of the day. Motivation can be a barrier. Competing values. Yeah, I would love to be in shape, but I also want to spend time with my kids. I also want to get that promotion. I also want to eat a pizza. And that's true for anybody. But for those with the ADHD, there are some that are a little bit more specific to us that we tend to face that maybe other people won't, or there are things that we tend to face more often. And those would be things like sensory barriers. So something might affect us just a little bit more where if the weights hurt our hands, we might be a little more sensitive to that, or the clothes fit too tight. I have restless leg syndrome. I also have sensory sensitivities. And so if I put on my workout clothes and they fit too tight, I am not going to want to put those on. And I might not even realize that that's what's getting in my way, but it legitimately is. There's also time. Anyone can not have time to work out, but those with ADHD often have to work longer hours to accomplish the same things. And so maybe it starts in high school where it takes longer to do our homework. And so we don't have as much time afterward to go out and play. I know that I was struggling in high school. And so one of the things that I had to do was give up soccer and not play anymore because I wasn't getting my work done for school. I gave up exercise to spend more time doing the things that I knew I needed to do because it took me longer to finish my homework because I would get distracted. Just the mental effort of battling our own brains every day, trying to focus and trying to remember what we put where and what we did with what, it's exhausting. And then the impulsivity of like, I said yes to something that I completely forgot I was going to work out. So they work together, right? So I'm exhausted. I impulsively said yes to a social invite and I forgot that today was the day I was going to work out. So all of our ADHD symptoms kind of work together to make it really difficult for us to work out. This has been such a struggle for me that I've actually spent a lot of money, even when I couldn't afford to, on expensive classes or.
And you can cut it there.
The problem with that was it wasn't sustainable because.
Yeah, so thank you for playing that. And, you know, she's talking a little bit more broadly, but some of the challenges she talked about specifically around sensory is something that we can imagine could occur on a ski hill. There's a lot of new gear that comes into play that may not be comfortable or feel good when we have sensory sensitivities. And then there's just, yeah, some of the other barriers she talked about. So we're gonna shift and talk about some of the potential benefits of snowboarding for people that have that are neurodivergent. And when we did the research for this, we didn't find anything that was specifically about snowboarding and neurodiversity. There were studies, for example, around skateboarding, skiing, balance sports in general, balance activities, those kinds of things. And so just FYI, if you're a budding researcher, there's a gap there and you might want to fill it. So you can flip to the next slide, please, Jen, when you're ready. There was a skateboarding study done, and it involved kids with ADHD, and they participated in skateboard coaching for 4 months. And they got to learn skateboarding, and generally they enjoyed it. And for many of them, that desire and motivation to skateboarding was beyond the structure of the skateboarding coaching, but came from a place of intrinsic motivation. So meaning it came from inside them, that they were like, yeah, this is cool, I like this. And what it did for them is that it increased their physical skills, like balance, motor skills, those kinds of things, which can be more challenging or lacking for someone that's neurodivergent. But it also improved their cognitive skills. So there was ways that they measured improvements in attention and focus and things like that. And we can move on. And there were other more recent studies done. And one of them was, again, for folks who had ADHD, and when they participated in action-oriented sports, they looked at what happened in their brains. And what they figured out is that these action-oriented sports were actually helping to optimize their dopamine levels. And so dopamine is connected to pleasure and reward centers. So it's often seen as like a bit of a happy chemical in our brain. And so that was able to be regulated and enhanced. And for many folks with ADHD, they actually have lower dopamine levels than the neurotypical population. There was other research done about what happens when someone with ADHD engages in engaging stimulus. So they're practicing engaging stimulus. And so in a snowboarding context, that might be like doing a park lap, doing a bump run, going through the trees in fresh pow, like whatever it is. When they did that, it allowed them to enter into a state of hyperfocus. And they were fully in the moment and there. And that had an effect that was exhilarating and created a buzz, but it also had a calming effect. So that's interesting. And we can move, yeah, thank you. This quote is by an individual that is a ADHD and adrenaline sport advocate. So they love adrenaline sports and they have ADHD. And what they say is this: every split-second decision matters, and that kind of high-stakes engagement sharpens the mind in ways that nothing else can. It's almost as though the adrenaline rush brings my brain into alignment, forcing it to function at a level that feels natural and even calming to me.
Good.
So you can see how that really backs up the science.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. Additionally, studies have shown that the benefits of the balance activities extend just beyond the sport world, like Michelle alluded to with that quote. So it's been found that having a better sense of balance, which can come from practicing snowboarding, skateboarding, many board sports, and other balance activities, will foster confidence and boost the person's self-esteem. Right? I'm sure we can all think back to a time in our childhood and in a less politically correct world where we may have laughed at somebody stumbling either in a classroom or in a sports. And so that doesn't feel good when you're not confidently moving around in the world. So one of the benefits of balanced activities is that confidence and self-esteem that they get from having a better sense of themselves. And as the quote alluded to, it can support cognitive processes. So promoting that focus and mental clarity that individual quoted in that previous slide. And along with that, I'm sure we all recognize that any activity that's going to increase our core strength, our body awareness, is going to lead to side benefits such as injury prevention, improved posture, and decreases in stress, again, due to those hormones getting released through the activity itself. Next slide, please. So it has been shown, again, through studies and clinical research, that movement can help ease anxiety. Exercise is, it's probably been mentioned to this group. Exercise is good for both your physical health and your mental health. It can lead to reduced stress, again, from the chemicals that our brain uses to signal our body about what's going on. It's been shown to reduce fatigue. I mean, everybody can think of, how exhilarated you might feel after your daily workout or after a particularly exhilarating run on the slopes. And this, leads to improved alertness and concentration and enhancing someone's overall cognitive functions. And that can be really, really helpful for somebody who struggles in their daily life with an increase in their stress because of the deadlines that are mounting or their self-criticism in conjunction with the diagnosis that they may or may not have. Apologies. And next, yeah. So here's another quote from a mental health advocate. I've had my fair share of battling anxiety and depression, and there have been times when it felt like the weight of the world was crushing me. In those dark moments, snowboarding became my saving grace. It was the one thing that could pull me out of my own head and bring me back to the present moment. When I strapped in on my board and shredded down the mountain, all of my worries faded away, if only for a little while. And that quote particularly resonates with me because snowboarding is my happy place too. So I think, yeah, I'll pass it back over to Michelle. Next slide, please. Thanks.
Yeah, and so we're just kind of wrapping it up, tying it together. So the potential benefits of snowboarding sort of fall into different categories, and one is the physical aspect of it. And when we're snowboarding, there's actually something about the combination of moving our bodies along with engaging our mind and our senses, along with that ever-changing environment that we're moving through, that can really be beneficial for both capturing and sustaining attention. And that kind of environment can also be beneficial if someone is coming up against feelings of overwhelm. When you're moving through it, that can actually help reduce that overwhelm. And the way that we snowboard, where it's quite rhythmic and repetitive, it can be quite soothing for folks. And part of that is it provides a level of predictability. There's also ways that it can be beneficial for releasing built-up energy. And on the next slide, we have the ways that it can impact our life skills. So that can be really beneficial for all of us, but particularly for some neurodivergent folks, where it is a sport that demands, or an activity that demands our focus and it demands our attention. And it requires things like patience and discipline. It allows us to set a goal and work towards it. And that, when we overcome those kinds of challenges, that can be super beneficial, that it builds things like resilience and determination. And the other aspect of snowboarding, at least in North America, is that it's outside. And so that nature connection can also be really beneficial at alleviating stress and helping when there's a lot of sensory information coming in and calming. And the other aspect of it is it can really build community and allow us to have a sense of social connection. And then we've talked about supporting the brain a little bit. And so that's the next slide there. We've kind of touched on that. But some of the things that can happen is it can actually support the brain to grow new neural pathways. And that is really important for us to keep flourishing. And we talked about how dopamine can be regulated, that endorphins can be stimulated, and they can both really be supportive for mood and things like sleep. It can lower stress hormones. And the combination of the physical movement with adrenaline can actually, again, support attention and decision making. So we've got another little video that is going into some of these effects of what happens for the brain. We'll see if it's in French or English.
I'm pretty sure it's gonna turn in French automatically.
Salut les cerveaux. Aujourd'hui, je vais parler d'exercice. Attendez, où voulez-vous en venir?
Hello, brains. Today I'm going to talk about exercise.
Funny, this one I was able to switch. Which
55.
Freedom! What I forgot to factor in is that exercise isn't necessarily for the body. It's also amazing for the brain, ADHD brains in particular. But is it worth all the time and effort to work out just for the brain benefits? How exactly does exercise affect our brain? Ready? Wait for it. Cool science stuff. So when you exercise, what actually happens in your brain? I spent a month and a half looking into it with the help of doctoral candidate Patrick LeCount, who happens to be researching the impact of exercise on ADHD. Scientifically speaking, when you exercise, there's basically a huge neurotransmitter party in your brain. During exercise, your body releases happy chemicals, aka endorphins. You may have heard of them. At the same time, exercise also boosts dopamine and norepinephrine, the same neurotransmitters that stimulant medication increases in order to help us focus. What? This all happens pretty quickly, which is why you tend to feel happier and more productive for an hour or two after you work out. It's also why you might sleep better that night and not feel as stressed. But there's a long-term brain benefit too, and it's something you've probably never heard of. Exercise increases production of something called BDNF. BDNF is a protein that basically acts like fertilizer for the brain. How? It promotes neurogenesis, aka the creation of new brain cells. Yes, fellow nerds, when you exercise, you are literally growing your brain. All right, I'm sold. What do I have to do? Well, technically, research suggests that at least 30 minutes of moderate to high intensity cardio produces the most neurotransmitters in BDNF, but all exercise benefits ADHD brains. So do what's fun for you. Do whatever kind of exercise you like to do. If you don't like
And
to,
you can cut it there, Jen. Thank you. So yeah, that was just a little bit more of a breakdown of some of the brain benefits. And so we're going to talk about freeze and flow. So if someone is feeling anxious or they're experiencing fear, they may move into a freeze response. And that can mean that they're going to stop participating, they may avoid the activities, and that's not ideal when we are there to teach someone how to snowboard. And so but it's part of what happens for some of us when we go through fear or anxiety. And then we're going to talk about the opposite of that, which is flow. So essentially flow, the definition here, it's the action of moving along in a steady, continuous stream. And that allows us to be in the present so that we're no longer ruminating about, maybe mistakes we made in the past or worrying about future consequences. And we've got a few quotes and another little video that delve into this a little bit in terms of people's experience of snowboarding and how it relates to flow.
So this question was asked by an individual on Facebook, and I'm just going to read it out so we understand the context of the quotes that are going to come after this. So he said to the community, any other ADHD / on the spectrum folks have the same level of focus and quiet in the old noggin while on the hill that nothing else in your life, that includes meds, therapy, or coping mechanisms, has even come close to giving the same level of calm and relief. And Jen, if we go to the next slide. And some of the responses that were generated in this conversation kind of reinforce the medical or the clinical studies that have been done. So one individual says, it's my place to quiet my thoughts and engage in hyperfocus to the max. So again, alluding to that sort of ADHD superpower that can come through activity. Another one says, I have ADHD, and when I'm riding, usually the rest of the world disappears. I teach snowboarding, and a former supervisor joked that 40% of snowboard instructors have ADHD and the other 60% just haven't been diagnosed yet. I don't know if that's a Canadian instructor or what. Please do not go away and self-diagnose after this presentation. Another individual says, I'm autistic. Nothing ever helped me to calm down and made me as happy as snowboarding. No therapy, no meds, no anything. Gaming is pretty close, but not as much as snowboard. And I think that is pretty high praise, depending on the generation that individual might be from. If we go to the next slide, Jen. So another individual says, ADHD struggler here, picked up snowboarding at 17 and never went back. It's one of the only places my mind is completely at peace. And I think the common theme here is that idea of like Michelle alluded to, the combination of physical activity, mental engagement, and the goal setting / goal achieving happening in a relatively short time frame is helping these individuals make achievements, and it's an activity where they can leave their diagnosis at the chairlift, for a lack of a better way to put it, and really achieve that calming flow state that all these individuals are alluding to. Next slide, I think, Jen, is the video.
Should I play it now?
Yep, that's okay.
And you can start at 1:49.
Thanks, Michelle.
This is about more than just riding. It's about discovering what our neurodivergent minds are truly capable of. You know that feeling when your ADHD brain is just absolutely locked in, when everything else fades away, except what's right in front of you? That's not just hyperfocus. That's your neurodivergent mind doing exactly what its built brains are constantly processing everything. The snow texture, the changing light, the terrain up ahead of us. Where others might see overwhelm or just the ordinary, we see patterns in the extraordinary. That too much processing power, it becomes your secret weapon for reading the mountain like others can't. Remember in school when they said we think too fast or jump to conclusions? On the mountain, that rapid fire processing is exactly what you need. When I'm navigating through tight tree lines on a board in Andermatt, my brain is making hundreds of micro decisions per second and loving every minute of it. It really blew my mind after my ADHD diagnosis. All those sensory sensitivities, they're actually giving us more data about the mountain than most riders get. We feel every texture change in the snow, notice subtle shifts in the slope angle, and we pick up on wind patterns and potential storms coming in that others miss. Let's talk about the time blindness. You know, that thing that usually has us showing up late to meetings or events. On the mountain, it transforms something incredible. When you hit that perfect flow state, time just disappears. Suddenly you're completely present. Something our ADHD brains, I know mine for sure, often struggles with. Here's what nobody tells you. It's not about fighting our natural tendencies. It's about finding the environments where they become strengths. For me, it was my time in the Alps and, of course, my home Colorado mountains, where every trait that made classroom learning challenging, I realized became an asset for navigating technical terrain. That mental clarity you feel on the mountain, it's not an accident. That's your brain finding its natural rhythm. And I'm going to show you exactly how to tap into it, whether you're just starting out or getting back.
And so you can cut it there. Thank you.
So let's break it down exactly.
So, yeah, we're going to move into some instructor tips and tools in a moment. Thank you, Jen, for your technical wizardry there. And I wanted to start by just recognizing that as CASI members, CASI instructors, and you can flip to the next slide, you already have a lot of great resources. And so one of the ones that I went through and had a look at was the Ride Teaching Guide. And I pulled out some excerpts from that. And these are some of the things that I pulled out. So adjust your expectation. So that's really important when we're working with neurodivergent students, because the pace of learning may be different. We may need more repetition. We may need to jump steps or add steps in that aren't always there. Be prepared for various levels of coordination. So we've talked about the fact that when someone is neurodivergent, there can be physical aspects that go hand in hand with that. So there can be ways that their motor skills or balance or coordination is impacted. Managing fears by creating a comfortable and safe environment, really huge. Setting clear guidelines for behavior, showing empathy, and being extra sensitive. So we've discussed that a little bit already, that when your mind is divergent from the way that most people process information and see the world, then the world can be a bit of a mysterious place. And sometimes it can be a challenging place. And so this guide that Cassie has created is broken down into age categories. And that works really well for neurotypical students. And there's a lot of benefit to that. And one thing to keep in mind is that when you're working with neurodivergent students, there's times that their chronological age, so the number of years that they've been on the planet, does not match their developmental age. So that these tips and tricks and tools in here may be, even though you're looking at the 5 to 8-year-old category, they may be really relevant for someone that's older than that. And so that's just something to keep in mind, but knowing, that you already have a lot of really good resources at your disposal. And sometimes it's just about expanding your understanding of where they're useful. So if we move to the next slide, this is a way that CADS is providing some tips and tools. So starting in the center, that positive relationship is really key. It's really fundamental. And this is true for any lesson, but maybe particularly true when we're working with neurodivergent students. And so creating some kind of connection with your student. And if you're working with an adult, that may mean finding a way to become an equal with them. What are your commonalities? If you're with a kid, it may be more about finding out what are their passions, what are they really interested in. And when you can show interest in what they're interested in, then that can really help you to develop that connection. Clear and simple instructions. Again, that is key for any lesson. But recognizing that for some neurodivergent folks, words, talking, may just go right over their heads and they may not hear it. And so finding ways to be creative about how you deliver instructions can be really helpful. Creating predictability. So what this is essentially referring to is, how do you prep people and front load people for what is coming next so they know what to expect? They know what is coming up. Celebrating often with positive feedback, again, relevant for every lesson, but maybe particularly relevant for this population. And when we're celebrating, it's easy, I think, for us to celebrate the wins and when they're doing really well. But there's an invitation to, can we also celebrate the effort? So when someone is really trying, when they're putting in a lot of effort, even if they're not successful right away, can we also celebrate that? So celebrating the effort as well as the achievements. And then Tom's going to go into, in more detail, the ways that we can learn about our students and really stay curious.
Right on. Next slide, please, Jen. So in the CADS curriculum, one of our foundational pieces that we teach to our instructors and to our volunteers is what we call the assessment of abilities, and the acronym is the AOT. I pushed for OAT, but it was overruled many years ago. But it is the process of asking questions, observing the individual both in response to the tests and also in sort of the wider environment that they're moving through. And then based on the questions that we ask and our observations, doing tests to confirm our assumptions or to confirm our understanding of things. And these can happen in any order depending on how your snow school or meets their clients or how you are being introduced into that lesson situation. But what they're going to tell you is ways to connect to your student. What are the better communication strategies for that individual? What things do we potentially need to avoid in a lesson scenario? And other motivation or support strategies that could be useful depending on the situation. And through the testing, ideally in a CADS environment, we're going to be really testing the individual's balance, mobility, and strength up front so that we can plan a safer lesson or a safer terrain choice for the lesson plan for that day. And the idea here is that it is a process. It's not a checklist that we do when we first meet the student, and then we lock in and proceed with the plan for the lesson. This process needs to keep happening throughout the learning environment so that we make sure we stay on top of that person's either anxiety levels or fatigue and motivation levels, and just to make sure that they're still comfortable and safe being outside in a lesson scenario. If we can move to the next slide, please, Jen. So for a lot of our neurodivergent clients and how we teach in the CADS environment is sort of the key questions that every instructor or club administrator should find out about the individual learner or athlete. So on the screen, if it's in white, it's the instructor talking to a more mature or more capable athlete. And in blue is how we would word it if we were talking to a caregiver or a parent about an individual who's less able to give us that information directly. So we encourage all of our instructors to find out what is that passion, interest, or hobby that's really going to help me get that person's attention to focus on the lesson, and how I can turn their passion for Marvel characters into a lesson plan on the hill that's going to help me get that person to achieve an outcome that we want. The next question is, what are the support strategies? What is going to help that individual learn best or help that child learn the best? Do they need a lot of visual demonstration, or do they really work best with very short, clear instructions? Do I need to invent a rhyme or something each time I'm giving them some feedback or something so that they pay attention to me? And then probably the most critical, but we try and downplay this because we're not trying to focus on the deficits. We're trying to build the better learning environment. What are the things I should avoid? What are the triggers that may cause an undesirable behavior or an undesirable result? Potentially it could be colors, it could be textures, it could be somebody just doesn't really like loud beeping noises, which on a ski hill, many snowmobiles and many pieces of machinery are going to give out that high-pitched shrill sound. So if I know that is a trigger for somebody, I can come up with ways of avoiding that or lessening the impact of that on my lesson environment. But yeah, the important thing with the AOT process is that it is a process. It is not a task that we complete and move on from. It's something we build into our learning environments. And I think the customer experience is the CASI equivalent to that. It's always checking in with our learner to ensure that they're having the best time possible. I think over to you, Michelle.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Tom. And so here's an invitation of whether we can stay curious when we come up against some unexpected behavior. So often when someone is displaying some kind of behavior that is undesirable or it's impacting those around them, we can automatically go into the story that they're being bad, they're being defiant, they're doing something wrong. And so the invitation is is there a way that we can be more curious to take on perhaps what they may be experiencing, perhaps their perception, because maybe the way that they're responding is the way that their brain is reacting to the environment or their perception of the environment. There is a saying that all behavior is communication. And so could we be curious about that? What is this behavior trying to communicate? Is there a chance they're overwhelmed or overstimulated? Maybe they're confused. Maybe they don't understand the expectation. Maybe there's some kind of internal struggle going on. And if we can be curious, then hopefully we can find a little bit of empathy and maybe some understanding of ways to mitigate the situation that don't lead to us going into like bad cop mode or something like that. And if we flick to the next slide, this is actually a quote from the guy that was talking in the video, Chadwick Lukasiewicz. And he's an ADHD advocate. So that means he has both autism and ADHD, as well as being a licensed counselor. So what he said was, sometimes the very traits we struggle with become our greatest strengths when we find the right environment. The mountain doesn't see ADHD as a deficit. It recognizes it as a natural gift for interpreting terrain. And we've got a few more tips and tools. And the concept of creating predictability, if you jump to the next slide when you're ready, Jen, is about, well, one of the concepts around this is front loading. So front loading is basically giving people information about what to expect for what's coming up. And these are two tangible visual tools that we can use. So if anyone did do the EDM training with us last year, you probably had an opportunity to create a visual schedule. And so a visual schedule can be like this with little stick figure drawings, but it could also be a list of words. If you're working with people that are readers, maybe you have a group that meets every week. It's a weekly group and you have a set plan of what's going to happen. For some learners, it's going to be way more beneficial if they can see it written down than if they're just hearing the words, because perhaps they're not hearing the words. So, and one thing with this visual schedule is it's making it really clear that we're saying bye to the parent, and then at the end, we're meeting back up with the parent. That can be something that is really important for a learner, and they may not recognize that or understand that without us giving them that information. And that's going to feel a lot safer than not knowing, is this lesson going to go forever? The other concept is first then. And a first then can be something that is more verbal or it can be more visual. But basically the first then is the concept that we're going to do something, a task that is less desirable, maybe a little more boring or uninteresting or difficult, And so maybe first we're going to be working on our toe side turns, and then we get to have a break and a snowball flight. So the then is something that is desirable to the student, something that they're excited about. That is going to be maybe a form of motivation for helping them move forward and do the thing that's more difficult. And other way, also have this technique for addressing overwhelm. And so this is something that could happen if you are experiencing anxiety, but it can happen for a variety of reasons. And so it's all about grounding in the present moment. It's related to the concept of mindfulness. And sometimes it can be really beneficial to tune into our senses and help us be present in our bodies. And so a technique is the 5 things sensory reset. So we could ask the student, hey, can you tell me 5 things you can see right now? So maybe it's like the trees, the chairlift, the skier going by. How about 4 things you can touch? Oh, I can touch my goggles, I can touch my helmet. 3 things that you can hear, 2 things that you can smell or imagine smelling, and 1 thing that you can taste or imagine tasting. So bringing us into our senses, bringing us into our body and the present moment. And whenever you're ready, you can move to the next slide. And this is just some other possible supports that our neurodivergent students may need, depending on where their strengths are and the areas that they need support. So they may need support to focus and stay on task. They may need breaks and pauses, and that can be different. Like, is it a break where it's quite still and calm? Is that what they need? Or is it a break where they're quite busy and it's loud? And that's going to depend. For some students, they're going to need novelty and variety to stay stimulated. For other students, they're going to need routine and sameness. Depends on the individual. Some students may need support to be in a group and how to interact with the group and be a part of the group. Other students are going to need a lot of support around risk and safety. So, what is the Alpine Responsibility Code? How do we follow it? What are the rules for being in this group? And as we've talked about, encouragement for both their effort and their achievement is really valuable. And we're coming close to the end here now. So, we're just going to do a little review of what we've talked about. So, we did some explanations and definitions about what neurodiversity is and some of the different words and language that is associated with that. Tom did some definitions and explanations of these 3 different neurotypes: autism, ADHD, and anxiety. And then we've talked about the snowboarding benefits, how that could actually be really beneficial for a neurodivergent learner. We looked at some tips and tools. So there was the circle image that covered positive relationships, clear and simple instructions, creating predictability, celebrating often, learning about your student, staying curious. Tom looked at the AOT, the assessment of ability, and those 3 key questions that you might ask a parent or an individual to really understand them. And then we talked briefly about that 5 things sensory reset. So thank you for being here. We really appreciate everyone that showed up, for your time and your participation. And if this topic was of interest to you, you can flick to the next slide, Jen. There are some other options. So CADS does have an e-learning, and that's called Countdown. And so that is a 90-minute e-learning, and it's all about how to support neurodivergent students. And that's available on the CADS website, which is up on the screen there, cads.ski. And it's free if you are a CADS member, or it's a $20 fee if you're not. And then we also do have certification. So there's starting at the beginning, there's a level 1 snowboard certification, and that covers working with neurodivergent students, but it also covers the other disciplines that you may interact with if you're working in the adaptive world. And then there is a specific module that's only about neurodiversity, which is known as the ASDCI module. And that stands for Autism Spectrum Disorder Cognitive Impairment, which is a very big mouthful. And we're slowly moving away from that kind of more medical language. It's a process. So yeah, if you have interest, please feel free to check out the website, and we're open for connection as well. I didn't think to put our emails up there, but anyway, and thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Michelle. Thanks, Tom. Michelle, Clifford, do you have any question for the group? Or I think it was answering all of our questions, right?
Yeah, no, most of the questions were answered as you were flipping into the next slide. The videos, I was curious. I think you posted them in the chat, which was awesome. So if anybody wants to look at those more, that would be a good way to do it. But you also send them out in an email, I think. The cool thing with this presentation, I thank you, Michelle and Tom, as well. It was really got my brain thinking snowboarding again, which is really nice. But sorry, the kids are just arriving. It started making me think of different ways that I can apply this stuff into some of my own lessons. And I had a question for either one of you. Is there any examples where using these tools and strategies was really effective and like created a really positive environment out when you have been out on snow with students or even candidates in certification courses? Anything that like pops to your mind that was a really positive experience for you, either yourself or one of the students?
Who wants to go
Tom, you
first?
want to?
Sure,
You go
I'll,
ahead.
I'll share. So early in my CADS career, I had an individual, and I was getting reports from some of my colleagues that he was not following the Alpine Responsibility Code as he should have been. So he was getting way, way too close to other riders on the hill. He was potentially going too fast through the slow zones. So I had to have a conversation with this learner and their instructor. But basically it's centered around, okay, like you know how to ride, you're riding really fast. That's awesome. What do you want to get out of this experience or this environment? And it was the goal setting. So looking past just the behavior, trying to understand, okay, what's going on. And it ultimately comes down to he was getting bored. There was no novelty in his lesson structure anymore because he had kind of surpassed his instructor's ability to teach him more skills. So we took him under different instructors' wings with the goal to getting him to a place where he could be an instructor's aide. And so it wasn't focusing on the behaviors anymore. It was trying to redirect his attention and his efforts to another goal, a goal beyond just learning to ride. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's really neat.
And he got his Cassie many years ago.
Awesome. Very cool.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So I have an example of a student I worked with, and she was an adult and had a lot of verbal language and really good self-advocate skills. And she rode opposite to me. So she was switch and I'm regular. And she was very visual. Words did not work for her. And so she wanted to follow me. And she was good. She was naturally very gifted. And so I had to ride in some pretty spicy terrain and I had to ride switch. And that's what really worked for her, is just being able to follow my line like directly. And if I was, and particularly if it was new environment, like a run she had never been down, or if we were working on a skill that she had never done before. And the other thing that worked really well for her was so video analysis, and then picking out the thing that worked. And like I would show her the video, give her just a little bit of information about what I was looking at, and it had to be like I could not say too much, and then she would label it. And so she was like rotating her upper body, and she was like, oh, floppy shoulder, and that was like her label for it. And then so when I would see it, I would be able to say, oh, floppy shoulder, and then she would know what to do to fix it and correct it.
Speak the same language.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool, thanks. Is there any question from the audience, the people that participant to this session? Feel free to turn on your microphone. Cool. Well, thanks, Tom. Thanks, Michelle. Thanks for preparing this to us. I think it was very valuable, really good information, and I think a lot of us can relate. And I've seen some examples of varied neurodivergent or neurodiverse students in our groups. No question. And thanks everybody for participating. It was really good to have you on this session today. It was the last session of our member session series for this fall. So next member session, we'll see you on snow. Make sure you sign up for our specific member sessions. they will be released through the season, so have a look at the calendar often. You'll see some new session popping up in your calendar every periods. Surprise. Thank you.
Thanks for the invite, Jen, and nice to see everybody tonight.
Yeah, thank you very much. Much appreciated.